Welcome back to Outside Views. And oh man, where do I even begin with the latest report from the World Trade Organization? I have to say, if anyone was still holding on to the idea that leaving the EU was some kind of glorious liberating moment for the UK economy, this WTO review should be a massive, sobering slap of reality. And it's not just an objective assessment, it's a damning indictment of the path the UK has taken. We are seeing the global trade arbiter itself, the WTO, flagging a clear, undeniable decline in the UK's share of global trade since that fateful departure. And this is exactly what the reasonable people warned would happen, and it's now being etched into the historical record by the very institutions designed to monitor global commerce. And the report lays it out in plain and painful language. Brexit has led to a permanent increase in trade costs for UK businesses. Permanent. And that word should send a shiver down the spine of every business owner in the country. This isn't a temporary blip, an adjustment period, or a teething problem. It's a structural impediment built directly into the new trade relationship. And the culprit is obvious. New border checks, new requirements, all the things that didn't exist when the UK was part of the single market. It's the bureaucratic friction, the paperwork mountain, the sheer administrative drag that's now weighing down the entire economy. And who's getting hit the hardest? Unsurprisingly, it's the small businesses, the supposed backbone of the economy, the ones least equipped to handle this regulatory nightmare. The WTO says their exports to the EU bloc have plummeted by 30%. 30%. That's not just a statistic. That's thousands of small enterprises that have either been forced to give up on exporting altogether or have seen a massive chunk of their revenue vanish. It's an absolutely unforgivable result that utterly betrays the promises made to those businesses. The vision of a nimble global trading nation unshackled from Brussels has instead resulted in a country that's actively making trade more difficult for its own people. The report also shines a harsh spotlight on the UK's long-standing investment problem, stating that investment as a proportion of GDP is well below other advanced economies. That's not new, but what is significant is the WTO directly linking this to the post-Brexit environment. They explicitly state that investment has been dampened by uncertainty over UK-EU relations. Uncertainty. This is the gift that keeps on giving. Businesses hate uncertainty. It freezes capital, it delays expansion, and it makes international partners wary. Why invest heavily in the UK when the rules of the game with its closest and largest trading partner are constantly up for debate or worse, subject to political brinkmanship? And let's not forget the other domestic structural barriers the WTO points out: weak competition, low business dynamism, and financing bottlenecks. Leaving the EU was supposed to turbocharge all of this, to usher in a golden age of deregulation and competitive dynamism. Instead, we are being told by a global trade body that these issues are still holding the UK back. It completely destroys the narrative that leaving the EU was the single silver bullet to all of the UK's problems. And then there's the specific industrial killer blow: high industrial electricity costs. The WTO singles this out as a major challenge. It's one thing to accept higher costs for a national strategic choice, but when you combine cripplingly high energy bills with massive new trade costs, you are essentially erecting a double barrier for manufacturers. In 2023, industrial electricity prices in the UK were reportedly nearly 50% higher than in France and Germany, countries that benefit from a more integrated European energy market and different generation mixtures. And even still here in Germany, we are top-notch in the price range because of our national politics there on energy. It's fracking expensive here, and Britain is even worse. And this is a huge competitive disadvantage and is simply being allowed to continue. The WTO's ultimate conclusion is crystal clear and sounds almost pleading. The UK needs additional efforts to cut trade costs and to tackle broader constraints on productivity and investment. It's a call to action that sounds like the UK government needs to perform an economic miracle just to get back to where it started. And meanwhile, look at what the rest of the world is doing. While the UK is struggling to manage its self-inflicted wounds, the European Union is finally moving to potentially ink its long-awaited trade deal with the Mercosur grouping of Latin American nations. A quarter century in the making. And this deal would open up huge new markets for EU goods and services, solidifying its position as a global trading behemoth. And the very week the UK is getting this negative WTO review, the EU is making headlines for expanding its global reach. Even the mixed signals coming from leaders like German Chancellor Friedrich Merz saying the Mercosur deal was unanimously agreed versus European Council President Antonio Costa saying they only agreed to take talks forward doesn't change the direction of travel. They are on the verge of landing a massive historic deal despite the political holdouts like France. It's an aggressive move that directly contrasts with the UK's trade strategy, which, let's be honest, often feels like a desperate game of catch-up. Speaking of major global shifts, we also see US President Donald Trump announcing he will cut a portion of the tariffs on Chinese goods. Whether this is a genuine policy pivot or a negotiating tactic tied to the fentanyl issue, it signals a desire to ease trade friction with a major global player. He also agreed a new trade deal with South Korea while on his tour in Asia. The world's superpowers are either reducing barriers or signing massive comprehensive agreements, aggressively expanding their commercial spheres of influence. And what's the UK's big trade headline right now? The extension of a deal with Switzerland that allows professionals to travel visa-free for up to 90 days. Don't get me wrong, this is useful for finance, tech, and legal services, and extending it through to 2029 is a welcome piece of stability. But a 90-day visa waiver with a relatively small, wealthy nation is not a substitute for a massive drop in trade with your largest geographic market. It's like patching a tiny hole in a sinking ship with a very fancy plaster. It's not the global ambitious trade deal that was promised. It's a niche arrangement that helps a few specific sectors. The overall trade negotiations with Switzerland on an enhanced deal are still crawling along, with talks only just concluding on competition and the next round set for early 2026. And this painfully slow pace perfectly illustrates the bureaucratic reality of trying to negotiate complex trade deals from scratch. You see, the problem with the whole post-Brexit trade fantasy was the assumption that securing numerous small deals would easily outweigh the benefits of the single largest trade agreement in the world, and that is membership of the EU. The WTO report has just confirmed that calculation was catastrophically wrong. The new costs are permanent, small businesses are failing to cope, and the perpetual uncertainty over UK-EU relations is actively killing investment. And this isn't just an economic misstep. It's a failure of national strategy and a clear demonstration of how trade friction, no matter how small, adds up to a huge headwind for an entire nation. The UK is now operating with one hand tied behind its back in the global trading race. The path back to realizing its full potential looks long, difficult, and based on the WTO's sober assessment, requires a fundamental rethink of its entire economic and trade model. Frankly, the evidence is in, and it confirms my deeply personal view. This entire project has been a monumental self-destructive mistake. The only question left is how long it will take for the political class to finally and honestly confront the sheer scale of the damage this has done. The WTO didn't just flag a hit to UK trade. It drew a red line under a failed experiment. And until that reality is embraced, the UK will continue to pay a hefty and permanent price. Thanks for watching, and if you want to see another video right now, the next one is right here in the end screen.